A WTMJ semi-exclusive. Very few people had access to a pretty important person for the state of Wisconsin right now who was in town on Tuesday. Eric and I had an opportunity to meet with the president and vice chairman of Microsoft. Microsoft is a company that's building two huge data plants in data centers in Mount Pleasant, northern Racine County. Also wanted to build yet another one in Caledonia. Folks rallied against it, and ultimately plans for that ended up not going through. But there are larger plans for Microsoft in the state of Wisconsin, and Eric and I had a few minutes with the vice chairman and president of that company, an interview that we've long been trying to set up. In fact, particularly relevant, given that
he's a SOTY Award winner, Standout of the Year, and he actually knew that.
You guys are the gold standard.
No.
You are?
Wait a minute, who told you that?
Maybe say that when we're done.
I grew up here watching WTMGA, listening to WTMGA. I still check out what you all have on the web, all that good stuff.
By the way, so speaking of that, before we get started, you were named one of our morning
You're aware
of course,
of this.
my father told me right away.
No.
His dad told him. That's fantastic news.
That's Brad Smith, vice chairman and president of Microsoft, who is from Wisconsin originally, so hence his knowledge of WTMJ, the fact that he still has family here in the state and deep ties to Wisconsin.
Brad, we really appreciate you coming all the way here to accept your Standout of the Year award from Wisconsin's Morning News. That's clearly why you're here.
I wouldn't miss it. I gave a speech in Washington, D.C. this morning and immediately came on a plane to fly here to see you guys.
That's really nice. Appreciate that.
Well, let's start with your presentation in Washington today. This is about responsible use of artificial intelligence and specifically the infrastructure, which is of great interest to us here in Wisconsin. Your 5 points of commitment to communities where you're building AI data centers, including here in our state. You want to just give us the bullet points?
Yeah, obviously, we're living in a time when people have more questions about data centers, including here in Wisconsin. And what we concluded was that this is a time when we should not just acknowledge these questions, but address them head on, raise the bar on ourselves, and meet the needs of the public. So we address 5 issues that I think matter to a lot of people: electricity, water, jobs, taxes, and skills. And we lead with electricity with a pledge that we make and are making to every community in which we're building and owning and operating data centers, as we are in southeastern Wisconsin. We will pay our fair share so that our data center does not increase the electricity costs for consumers. I think that is of fundamental importance just to our future and to meeting public needs. And I think it is a big issue this year, not just for us, but for the state decision makers that have an opportunity, I think, to set a high bar for the entire state.
And the president has spoken on that as well. In fact, teased ahead that not just Microsoft, but other big tech companies would be asked to do the same. Were you compelled to do this, or are you leading on this?
We were not compelled. We've had a broad dialogue with folks across this administration, as we did with the last administration. Didn't expect the president to break the embargo on the news, so to speak, but these things happen.
He's on his own timeline. Right?
Exactly. And he had something nice to say, and he is pushing the industry, and I think that's the right thing for the President of the United States to do, to push the industry to raise the bar. But we were not compelled. It is the right thing to do. But interestingly, we're asking to be compelled. Because interestingly, we cannot pay a higher price on electricity for ourselves unless the Public Service Commission here in Wisconsin approves the proposal of We Energy to set a new tariff, an electricity tariff, for very large customers, including data centers. So I think I'm not only the first person to fly halfway across the country to accept this award. When was the last time anybody flew into the state of Wisconsin representing a big company and said, please require us to pay a higher price? In this case, require us to pay a higher price for electricity. It's the right thing, not just for the people of the state. It's, I think, critical for a long-term successful AI infrastructure business here.
Part of that pledge, of course, is jobs, too. When it comes to jobs, how do you train someone in AI to be able to work in a data center? How is that something that we can have the tools where the people here in Wisconsin can be able to handle something like that, learn something like that?
I think there's two things to think about when it comes to jobs. The first is that they're quite varied. Not only during the construction phase, but even in the operational phase of a data center, we employ a lot of electricians and a lot of pipe fitters. Pipe fitters because the closed loop liquid cooling system is so sophisticated. And it is skilled labor. It is skilled labor that people can pursue either in a community college, and so part of what we do is partner with community colleges, but also organized labor. The labor unions have excellent apprenticeship programs. So part of what we're doing is partnering with them to do more, to train more people. But once we're operational, there's also jobs, higher tech IT jobs, network security jobs, physical security jobs, again, a wide variety of jobs. The key, again, is training, and especially through the community colleges. That's one of the reasons that a big part of what we're doing in Racine County is working with Gateway, the technical college, so that the people who live in the community have the opportunity to get the skills needed to fill the jobs in the community. I think everybody who lives there should ask the question, is this an opportunity for my kids or for me or my family or my neighbors? And the answer is yes. The door is open. People have to walk through it and do the hard work to learn something new. But I think it's the right kind of investment for us to make, not just for ourselves, but for the community as a whole.
We've discussed it for some time, particularly with the big development in Racine County, but can you go through, especially as a Wisconsin kid yourself, why is this state, like right now, the epicenter for so much data center development?
Well, it's an interesting coincidence, and maybe a happy one, if you will, because the village of Mount Pleasant and the state did so much to attract the Foxconn investment, and obviously the Foxconn investment did not pay off the way people hoped. But the foundation was laid, the access to electricity, the zoning, and the like. So that's what brought Microsoft to the state. Once we were here, the rest of the industry woke up and said, wow, what do those folks know that we don't? Well, they visited Wisconsin as well. And as you know, the people are really friendly here. One of the things that makes me proudest as somebody who grew up here is when one of our folks in Seattle said, I like working with the public officials in Wisconsin better than I like working with them in any other state. The people are nicer. They figure out how to solve problems.
That checks out.
Yeah. How do you prevent obsolescence? I've heard that fear before of like a data center, by the time it's built, some of the hardware might not even be able to be used, or it would be obsolete before it even gets to be used. Is that a true fear, or are there ways to get around that strategy?
It requires planning. A lot of what goes into a data center will not become obsolete quickly because you have buildings and walls and HVAC systems and hugely sophisticated electrical substations and the like. But what people are typically talking about are the computer chips. And so when we buy the most expensive and advanced graphical processing units, the GPUs, we look at those and we expect that about every 5 years, they'll have to be replaced with newer models, just like you might replace your laptop or your phone. But I think careful planning helps. Ideally, what you do is you put in 20% new chips every year, and that way you rotate 100% over 5 years. But it's a great example of how I think a company has to be very sophisticated in how it does its planning.
We're talking with Brad Smith. He's Vice Chairman and President of Microsoft. Brad, one more thing on the data centers, and then I want to move on to some larger issues about artificial intelligence. There's been opposition to specifically your plans to expand into Caledonia, but not even just your data center, but others across the state. How have you processed the fears and concerns, and in some cases the testimony against the location of these data centers here?
I think this is a critical year for the evolution of AI and data center investments. First, I think it's a critical year for a company like Microsoft and for our industry. I think we have to be more transparent than we were historically. Traditionally, a big company would come in and would buy up land anonymously because the moment it said who it was, the price would skyrocket. And it created a culture, in my view, where we were not as open as we need to be. And I think the vote in Caledonia reflected that. People didn't know who we were until the eve of the vote, and by then it was too late. So we need to change, and we are. Now, there's a second part of this where I think the eyes of the nation rightly will be on Wisconsin this year. Because the real question ultimately is whether there's not just a high bar set by a single company, but there's a high bar that applies to every company. And there's only one way to do that, and that's to ensure that this work by data centers is governed by a common law across the state. This is a year when that will be an important issue before the Wisconsin legislature. And when I read the legislation that is emerging, one of the things that's fascinating to me is that the Democrats and Republicans in this state, in the legislature, I would say, agree on about 80% of the issue. They both want to protect consumers from higher electricity rates caused by data centers. They both want responsible use of water. They both want more transparency. And then, as is always the case, there's probably 20% on which the two political parties will never agree. So this is the question of the year in Wisconsin. Can these two political parties work together? Can they pass a law? Can they put in place the protection for everyone in this state to attract this investment, to bring in jobs, to bring in more tax revenue, to build a better future for manufacturing in this state? Or are they going to let the 20% divide them? I want to use my voice. I want Microsoft to use its voice. I hope that people in the business community across the state will say, let's bring the best out in each other. Let's find common ground. This is a common cause. This is a great opportunity for the state of Wisconsin to show the nation that it can build a better future by bringing people together.
It's Brad Smith, Vice Chairman and President of Microsoft, also a Wisconsin native, and seems to be a very nice man. Now, I'm not suggesting that because of that or any of those things that folks ought not be naturally skeptical of one of the biggest companies on the planet doing anything, right? So that's fair. Mm-hmm. I mean, Microsoft is a $3.5 trillion company. They are the fourth richest company on the planet. If you were wondering, I just looked it up. It's NVIDIA, Alphabet, and Apple in that order before Microsoft. Alphabet being the parent company for Google, right?
Yep.
So, okay, this is one of the richest companies on the planet. It's a big company. It does what it wants, and it didn't get to be one of the richest companies on the planet without conducting good business that's good for them. So all of that is fair and said, so we should stay on it. We should continue to ask questions, but we present to you sort of his unfiltered idea and presentation as to what this can be.